Before starting, be sure to review the complete assembly guide available by scanning this QR code or visiting tsoproducts.com/support. Lay the router table face down and slightly overhanging your MFT3 table. Choose which side of the router table will abut the MFT3 table and locate the two holes along that edge. Place the machine bracket over one of these holes with leg oriented down. Insert an M6x25 flathead screw through the hole in the tabletop and into the threaded hole in the bracket. Snug, but don't tighten yet. Repeat for the second bracket. Using the hex driver, install two M6x10 cap screws through the shelf bracket and into the threaded holes in the machine bracket. Snug, but don't tighten yet. Repeat for the second bracket. Using a number 2 Phillips, install two panhead screws through the shelf bracket and into the pilot holes in the table. Snug, but don't tighten yet. Repeat for the second bracket. Slide the spring onto the long cap screw and insert through the slot in the shelf bracket and into the hammer nut. Make sure the knurled side of the hammer nut faces the bracket. Hand thread until the end of the screw is flush with the back end of the hammer nut. Repeat for the second bracket. Position the hammer nuts horizontal as shown. Holding at a slight upward angle, place the router table onto the MFT3 so that its machine brackets rest on top of the MFT3 extrusion. You may need to push in the spring-loaded screws so that the hammer nuts clear the T-slot. The assembly should drop down and the table should now sit flat. With the hex driver, push in the spring-loaded screw and then fully tighten, all the while maintaining pressure on the spring. Repeat for the second bracket. Looking through the side of the MFT3 extrusion, verify the hammer nuts have turned and clamped against the extrusion as shown here. Using a number 3 Phillips driver, tighten the two flathead screws on the router top. Using the hex driver, tighten these two M6x10 cap screws. Repeat for the second bracket. Using a number 2 Phillips driver, tighten the two panhead screws that hold the table to the shelf bracket. Repeat for the second bracket. This concludes general assembly. Here's how to remove the assembled table. Using the hex driver, loosen the middle spring-loaded socket head screw located on the machine bracket, so the hammer nut disengages from the MFT3 extrusion. Repeat for the second bracket. Lift the outside edge of the router table at a slight upward angle. With the hammer nuts disengaged, you can now remove the router table. Here's how to attach the assembled table. Ensuring the hammer nuts are horizontal, place the router table at a slight downward angle and onto the lip of your MFT3 extrusion. Slide it in so the hammer nuts enter the D-slot and the machine brackets hook onto the MFT3 extrusion. With the hex driver, push in the spring-loaded screw and then fully tighten, all the while maintaining pressure on the spring. Repeat for the second bracket. Looking through the side of the MFT3 extrusion, verify the hammer nuts have turned and clamped against the extrusion as shown here. Here's how to micro-adjust the height of the router plate by finger feel or using a straight edge. Determine if the router plate insert is flush to the table. If not, adjust it by following these steps. Using a number 3 Phillips, loosen the 4 flathead screws that secure the router plate insert. Using the 3mm hex key, turn the 4 set screws under the router table to raise or lower the plate. Confirm the router plate insert is flush with the table, or continue adjusting as necessary. Using a number 3 Phillips, tighten the 4 flathead screws that secure the router plate insert. Here's how to install your router. With a number 3 Phillips, loosen the 4 flathead screws and remove the router plate insert from the table. Line up the holes in your router base with a plate insert. You can do this with or without the router attached. Use the screws that came with your router, or use the included M4x8 pan screws if attaching a Makita router. Place the router plate, with router base attached, through the square hole in the router table. Using a number 3 Phillips, retighten the 4 flathead screws that hold the router plate to the table. Optionally, you can fill the unused holes in the router plate insert with the included hole plugs. Here's how to attach the fence to your router table. Slide 2 M6T bolts into the holes on the tabletop. Ensure the head of the T-bolts slide into the routed slot inside the channel as shown here. Place the fence on the M6T bolt studs and tighten with 2 large knobs. Here's how to install the dust port onto the router table fence. Install two M6x14 flathead screws into the threaded holes on the fence and tighten. Install the dust port onto the threaded studs in either the horizontal or vertical orientation. Secure with two knobs. Here's how to install the two-piece sacrificial fence. Insert 4 T-bolts through the holes in the fence, held in place with 4 knobs. Slide the sacrificial fence onto the T-bolts, pushing each T-bolt through the lower slot on the sacrificial fence. Repeat for the second fence and secure with 4 knobs. Optionally, assemble a fence stop as shown. Then, slide it into the top slot of the sacrificial fence, position as desired, and secure with a knob. 2 fence stops are included. Assemble the bit guard with 2 T-bolts and 2 knobs as shown, and slide it into the top slot of the sacrificial fence. Adjust as needed and secure position with both knobs. If the router table is lower than the surface of your MFT3 top, you can shim the router table by following these steps. Using a number 3 Phillips, loosen the 2 flathead screws on the router table top. Using a number 2 Phillips, loosen the 4 panhead screws that hold the router table top to the shelf brackets. Run the fence across the MFT3 and router table and secure with 2 clamps. Insert spacer between the shelf bracket and the bottom of the router table top, then tighten the screws. Repeat for the other bracket. Using a number 3 Phillips, tighten the 2 flathead screws on the router table top and test for coplanar.